Hello and welcome to a video on our local history of El Paso, and today we're going to be talking about Geronimo, a prominent leader and medicine man from the Badonkohe tribe, which is an Apache tribe in New Mexico. So let's get started. A quick biography review. Geronimo was an Apache leader and a medicine man who is best known for his fearlessness in resisting anyone, Mexican or American, who attempted to remove his people from his tribal lands. He repeatedly evaded capture and life on a reservation, and during his final escape, a full quarter of the U.S. Standing Army pursued him and his followers. Now let's get into more detail as we take a look at the timeline of Geronimo's life. And here it is, here's a little format of it. And we can take a look at Geronimo's early life first. So Geronimo was born in today's Arizona in the upper Gila River country on June 16, 1829. Geronimo's birth name was actually Gaohakla, which means one who yawns. He was part of the Badonkohe band of the Chiricahua tribe of the Apaches, which consisted of about 8,000 people. When Geronimo had grown up, the Apaches were at war with the Mexicans from the south, the United States government from the north, and neighboring Comanche and Navajo tribes. Geronimo was skilled and showed promise as a hunter at the age of 17, with him leading four successful raids of nearby tribes. Now, if we look at the next part of the timeline, we can see that there was one tragedy that occurred during Geronimo's life, which ultimately shaped his hatred for anyone who attempted to subject him or his people. During his away trading trip in 1851, Mexican soldiers led by Colonel Jose Maria Carrasco attacked his family's camp, murdering his mother, his wife, and his 3 children. Continuing, Geronimo is grieving, and he follows Apache traditions by burning his family's belongings. He then heads towards the desert, where he claims he hears a mysterious voice that tells him no gun will ever kill you. With this mysterious sort of awakening, Geronimo hunted down his family's killers and devoted his life to avenging them. Now we can add some context into all of this. American Western expansion brought woes and foes to the Apache tribe. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed in 1848, ended the Mexican-American War, and Mexico was forced to surrender much of their land from the American Southwest to the United States, which included the land of the Apaches. Adding on, the Gadsden Purchase in 1854 gave the U.S. additional land in today's Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. According to Britannica.com, a secondary source that provides a broader understanding of Geronimo's resistance to westward expansion, the discovery of gold in California around the mid-1800s started a series of treaties designed to extinguish Indians that lived on the land of the routes to the Pacific. This sudden surge led to serious Indian wars, and many from both sides of the white settlers and Indians were killed. As federal forces flooded these regions, many forced tribes into various reservations among different regions, and one of the victims was the Apache tribe. Continuing on the timeline, the secondary source allows us to understand why it is that Geronimo resisted foreigners and how it is he went about evading his pursuers. And during the 1850s and 60s, Geronimo had carried out various deadly raids against the Mexicans after his family's death. In 1872, the U.S. government established a reservation for the Chiricahua Apaches, which included at least a portion of their homeland, but they were soon evicted and forced to join other Apache groups at the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. Deprived of traditional tribal rights, short on ration, and homesick, Geronimo and his followers broke out 3 different times, and his knowledge of the hills and the area allowed him to evade his pursuers. Now you can imagine the embarrassment the U.S. military and the politicians felt by the fact that a man riding a horse was able to escape the military might of the United States. And I guess the voice of the desert was right, because he wasn't harmed by a bullet. Continuing on Geronimo's timeline, in May 1885, Geronimo led 135 Apache followers to a daring escape from the San Carlos Reservation. And to evade capture, he pushed his people even to go as far as 70 miles per day. However, in March of 1886, Commander of the Department of Arizona, Colonel George Crook, forced Geronimo to surrender. But again, Geronimo escaped undercover with 40 of his followers in the darkness. Now, nearly 5,000 U.S. soldiers and 3,000 Mexicans pursued Geronimo and his men. Just a couple of men, not an entire fleet of people. But anyways, they were able to hold out for about 5 months until Geronimo turned himself in at Skeletal Canyon of Arizona in September 4th, 1886. Now let's pull up a picture here. Here is an image of General Crook and Geronimo, who met in Mexico's Sierra Madre Mountains in 1886 to arrange the terms of the Chiricahua Apache surrender. This photograph was taken by Camilla Sidney Fly, a photographer and owner of Fly's Photography Gallery in Tombstone, Arizona. He had accompanied General Crook to photograph the negotiation. Now, the reason why I picked this picture. So let's take a step back a little bit and I'll go over what just happened in Geronimo's life, right? So During his surrender, he was caught by Colonel Crook. However, he escaped again. Now, I just find this ironic and humorous, the fact that they're arranging the surrender terms of the Apache tribes, but yet again, Geronimo's gone. So yeah, that was a little reason why I picked that picture. Now, as we approach the end of Geronimo's timeline, he and his captives were sent to Fort Pickens in Florida by train, and then moved to Mount Vernon Barracks in Alabama. Now let's take a look at our second image. Here we have a picture of Geronimo and the rest of the Apache Indian prisoners on their way to Florida by train. This photograph was taken on September 10th, 1886, and this helps to show the similarities between the clothing of the Indians and those of the Americans on the train aboard. They all wear similar clothing and accessories when we look at their hats, their pants, and their boots. Now, the reason why I want to point this out is because when we think of these indigenous tribes, we often picture some of their eccentric clothing, their eccentric style of clothing. But we can see in this picture how much Western influence, or even just the world's influence in general, it has impacted these indigenous tribes and their way of clothing themselves. Now, as we really start closing up Geronimo's life, Geronimo and his men were finally transferred to Comanche and Kiowa Reservation near Fort Still in Oklahoma Territory. Geronimo spent over 14 years as a prisoner, and he occasionally went on government-approved trips to World's Fairs and Wild West shows where the once unbeatable leader was put on display. According to the Oglala Light, a primary source newspaper published by an organization on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, there had been no North American Indian tribe better known to the general public or has excited general interest than the Apache. In this published newspaper, the editor actually goes and meets Geronimo and asks him about his life and his travels. It's sort of like an interview. And so this is important because the public is able to see how events played out from Geronimo's perspective and see his motives instead of seeing him as some heartless man who goes around inflicting terror upon everyone he meets. Similarly, in the Indian Advocate, which is also a primary source newspaper published by the Sacred Heart Abbey in Indian territories by Christian missionaries, they also published a story on Geronimo's life. This newspaper company supported the spiritual welfare of the Indian race and portrayed Geronimo positively to their viewers. These two sources show how much of an influence and how popular Geronimo was after he had been captured and imprisoned. Even during his escape from the US military, he was a newspaper sensation. Now, adding on to Geronimo's government-approved trips, he was also able to attend President Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration. Now here, let's pull up our third picture. This picture shows Geronimo and 5 Indian chiefs wearing headgear and painted faces at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. They rode horses down Pennsylvania Avenue with a specific intent, and that is why I basically chose this picture. Their intent was generally to show President Roosevelt that they were no longer violent and were civilized Indians and wished to go back to the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. But unfortunately, President Roosevelt denied their request. We're now at the very end of Geronimo's timeline, and Geronimo died of pneumonia at Fort Still on February 17, 1909, and he's buried at Beef Creek Apache Cemetery at Fort Still in Oklahoma.